Good morning, Crest Network. This is Bill Giannone. I'm glad to be with you for this morning's webinar. The topic this month is going to be the real importance of data collection. We talked last month about all the different reasons why data is so important, and we talked about budgeting, and we talked about how you really can't budget unless you've got data. So this month we're going to drill down a little more about the whole concept of data collection and how it can help your company. Here's the first topic we're going to cover is the power of data. And as we all know, these are things that we know to be true, but we always have to think about why they're true, and sometimes we just don't go deep enough to understand it. Over the last 20 years, nearly every company that's become a mega company in the United States has done so almost exclusively through the collection and dissemination of data. Data is driving every decision of every other company that you will ever have contact with. Things have changed in the marketing world, in the production world, in the distribution world, and in the sales world, all because of this confluence of computers and data, and then the analysis of that. Data analysis, it used to be called business analysis or business consulting. Now we refer to analytics. People are analyzing the data. Now, that takes place in many forms. So for us, we know a lot of these companies by either logo or by name. Clearly, companies like Amazon and Facebook, we use them every day. They have billions of users. And believe it or not, all of these companies that are being listed here, the main criteria that they are in business for is to collect our data. Many of them, like Comcast, a cable provider, started off as a service provider. Amazon advertises itself as a distribution company, but I'm not sure how many of you know that Amazon does not make money off of the distribution of products. As a matter of fact, Amazon loses money every time one of us orders a product from their company. I know it sounds crazy because Amazon's one of the largest companies in the world, and Jeff Bezos is a billionaire many, many times over, one of the richest individuals on the planet. But believe it or not, almost the entirety of his money is made because he has an incredible bank of data. He provides that data to other companies. He provides the analytics of that data to other companies. And he makes money off of selling that data. He has so much data and he has such a collection process for that data that he actually has data farms all over the country where other companies will be renting space from him to do data collection as well. Companies, again, like Google, we assume is an information provider. We ask it a question, it gives us answers. But what Google's doing is it's categorizing and capturing every question we're asking, every selection we're making from their choices that they give us, and they're taking that data and the information about us and spreading that out and selling that as well. Clearly in our industry, we all know about Google Ads. A lot of us are using Google Ads and paying Google to try to get to the top of that page. So we understand how Google makes their money. But again, it's about data. It's about little bits and pieces of information, billions and billions of them gathered every minute. Facebook makes no money off of us. We all join for free. We all enjoy ourselves. But Facebook makes billions and billions of dollars. It made Mark Zuckerberg a very wealthy young man based on data collection, information about us. Finally, you see at the bottom middle, Verisk. For most of us, we know that that's the parent company of Xactimate. But Verisk is a data collection company. They are an analysis company. That's what they do. They are a Fortune 500 company, exchange listed stock that trades, and they make a lot of money based on one thing and one thing only. It's all based on their ability to gather data and get it out to people. Let me show you some names of some companies that, unless we have a relative working there, we've never heard of. These companies, however, as you see them pop up on the screen, these companies have more input into your daily life than any of the companies that we just showed you previously. These companies are 6 of the top 10 companies in the world for data collection, analysis, and distribution. So these companies are very powerful. You want to know how powerful? Here's just a short list, and I'm joking, but this is a short list of the things that they know about us. They grab all of our identifying data. This stuff is pretty easy. We can get most of this information from a lot of people, about a lot of people, just from Googling them on the internet. So this isn't the most scary part of this process, but they can get all of our identifying data. They can also get this kind of data, our social security, driver's license, birth dates, and birth dates of everybody in our families. I call this much more sensitive data. This is personal data. We don't want a lot of people to know about us. We acknowledge we're going to have to give up our phone numbers and our street addresses and maybe even our dates of birth. But to give up our social security or driver's license numbers, we assume that those are very secure and safe, and yet these are companies that are doing that all the time. Look at all this information that's out there about you. Height, weight, age, gender. Let's go down the list a little bit. Demographic characteristics of your family members. So they can tell the breakdown of your family, the size of the family, the type of family, how many boys or girls. Look on the other side, on the right side over here. We've got white collar or blue collar occupation. We've got length of residence. We've got the size of your household, what congressional district. These are all pieces of information that are minor little pieces. But when it comes time to putting them all together, they're very powerful. Court and public records. Obviously, a lot of this becomes what they say, public record. So this is available, but these companies are very, very adept at packaging this information in a single stop. Your social media information. Like I said before, when we use Amazon or Facebook or even MySpace, the old days of MySpace, if we're using any of these websites, every click on those websites is providing data to the website provider. They are now taking all of our information and packaging it and putting it through their analytics. And we'll talk about analytics in a second. Your home and neighborhood. They want to know where you live, what your neighborhood looks like, what kind of neighborhood you have in terms of what the average home prices or rent prices are, how old your house is, crazy things. General interest. They want to know about your dogs. They want to know if you go to casinos. They want to know if you play lottery tickets. They want to know what your music choices are, your political leanings, whether or not you even own a dog. Crazy information that's out there, but information that everybody wants from us. Even more general interest info. Which channels are you watching? You know, when I was younger, I'm a little older than most of you guys. When I was younger, we used to get a survey in the mail a couple of times a year from the Nielsen Corporation. And those were what the TV ratings were created by. This one company would send out a book, and you had to check off during the week all the different shows you were watching on TV. Well, the Nielsen Corporation doesn't have to do that anymore because our cable providers are able to look at our choices, and they know to the second how much time we're spending on ESPN versus CNN. So it's an amazing thing that's going on with technology, because we are freely giving over this data and this information about ourselves when in fact we don't even realize all of the things we're giving away. Financial information, and this list keeps going on. They know all about your vehicle. They know what type of vehicle. They know how many vehicles you've owned in your life. They know the price range of the vehicles, whether they're imported or domestic vehicles. When you travel, they know where you go, when you go, how you go. And personal purchase behaviors. Are you the type of person who orders from catalogs? Do you order online? Do you shop in stores? They know all of this because they get information about all of your purchases or your debit card expenditures. They know everything about us and your health data. So why should we care about data? Well, everybody's using data now in a term called analytics to tell us exactly what that other person is thinking, doing, or to anticipate their habits. So every business now is targeting, and I call it micro-targeting. You may notice that every once in a while you'll get emails and you may have just Googled a hotel in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and for the next week, all you'll be getting is these little pop-up ads about hotel values or offers in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Well, that's not by accident. Those of us who are on the internet, we know that's coming. We understand it, and most of us accept it. But we don't understand that that information is available to us as well. Whether we want information about our competitors, information about our potential clients, or more importantly, and the topic of today is information about our own companies. Most of us spend a lot of time working in our business and not working on our business. We can do great calculations as to how many air movers are needed in a building because we can do the math there, but we can't do the simple math of determining, like we wanted to do last month in the budgeting class, we can't determine our simple numbers on what's our gross profit margins, what are our average job sizes, things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now. We're going to try to make sense of your dollars and cents. You should be asking yourself these questions, and if you don't have the answers, that means you don't have the data, because all of the answers to these questions come only from the data. Otherwise, we're just guessing. How many leads are you generating? That's an exact number. You should be able to have an exact number for a year, and then you should be able to average that out per month. If you're doing proper analytics, you should be able to know what are your busy months, what are your slow months. You should have cycles developed within your company. Where are those leads coming from? You should know exactly how many leads are plumber leads, or agent of marketing leads, or internet leads. How effective is your marketer? Oh, my guy's so busy, he's out there 40 hours a week. He's out there 50 hours a week. He's all over the place. Well, how many leads is he generating? We can't just judge somebody's success by their activity. I always say activity without achievement is just a waste of time. And if we think really long and hard, we know we can identify at least one person in our company who's always very busy, but ends up doing very little. Are you getting proper results from your SEO buys? If you're someone who is investing in Google AdWords, or you're investing in other types of processes or programs that provide internet-based leads, what are your true returns? Are you getting 12 to 1 on your money? That should be an expected return. For every 1,000 you spend, you should be getting 12,000 in business back, minimum. I like to see people get 20 times return on internet expenses, but for me, 12 is a good starting point. You should know if you're there, and you should know if you're there to within 0.5%. What's your company's marketing blend? How many leads do you get from each of those sources? And then when you look at it as a compiled data source, what is the percentage of leads from plumbing, or the percentage of leads from any one individual? Most of us don't realize that we think we have this great relationship with Charlie the plumber and we're getting all this work. Well, several things happened. One of my clients had a great relationship with a plumber that was giving them 1 to 2 leads a month, which doesn't sound like a lot for a larger company, but they were very, very solid leads. The closing ratio on them was close to 100%, and every single one of them was a nice, large type of loss. These weren't these $1,200 mop-ups under a kitchen sink. These were large losses. Well, this relationship went on for 6 years. It was never going away. And unfortunately, the gentleman passed away from a heart attack, and that entire lead source evaporated. So the company now had to come up with a way to replace $100,000 of revenue from one lead source. Think about it. What is your blend? Are you too reliant on any one lead source? You should know that from your data. And finally, on the marketing side, you want to know what the closing ratio is. We're going to address that on the next slide, which is our production slide. But you should know what your closing ratio is. Once again, your marketers ultimately have to bring business in. It's great if they're bringing in 100 leads a month. But if none of those leads are closable leads, then again, they're confusing activity with achievement. I promised some production questions, and here they are. And, if we do all these right, and if we have all our answers, we'll be that lucky couple on the bottom right-hand corner. How many leads are you closing? We'll start with that again. On the production side, it all starts with signing the contract. If we don't know what our closing ratio is, we really have no idea how effective our marketing is or how effective our sales staff is. Whose leads are more likely to close? Once again, we touched on this before. If you've got plumbers that give you what I call garbage leads, just because they're looking to get some sort of chance of getting a referral out of you, or if they just are too lazy and they pass the lead along to you to do the legwork to go out and look at it, that might not be your best lead source. How effective is your salesman or first responder? I work down here at Reliable Restoration in Atlanta, and we've spent years analyzing our data, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. I show you exactly how we analyze it and how we compile it. But one of the things we realized is that we were closing our jobs using our crew leaders, and our closing ratio was not very, very strong given the type of losses we were getting leads on. We changed our model and we went to a salesman's first responder model where we have a dedicated individual who goes out and he's much more of an administrative and salesperson than he is a crew leader. Well, our closing ratios jumped almost 20% from one year to the next because we had a single person, and now we have two, sending out a single message, a consistent message, and has the skill sets. We were asking our crew leaders who have a very good production skill set to do things that they don't really necessarily have the skill set to provide to our clients. So we realized that the leads were okay, we just weren't getting the right closing ratios, and our closers needed to do a better job, so we changed that system. We would have never known that if it weren't for the data. What's our average job size? This is very important for you guys, especially on last month's topic of budgeting. If you don't know your job size, you're really shooting in the dark. You're not providing yourself with ammunition on anything having to do with what your company's size, structure, or potential is. You need to know those numbers. What's your cost of doing business? I can't stress this enough. We spend so much time out in the field doing our work, and we put very, very little effort into figuring out what it cost us to do that work. We're perfectly okay with taking the money in, laying the money out, and then figuring out what's left without analyzing those steps. And if we don't analyze those steps, we're forever going to be leaving money on the table. And that's, to me, the biggest sin we can do in restoration. This is a very, very lucrative business on the gross profit side, which is the last thing we're talking about. There aren't many businesses in this country that can make 70 to 75% gross profits and still be underperforming. And I say that tongue in cheek, but that's what's happening. A lot of us are making 70% gross profits, and we don't even realize how we're doing it. I know we're leaving 5 to 10% on the table if we're not really studying our numbers. So let's try to make a concerted effort to start looking at where the numbers in our own industry and our own business can lead us down the right path. With permission of Reliable Restoration, I'm going to show you a couple of the spreadsheets that I've developed for Reliable that we've been using for a couple of years now. I'm only going to give you snippets of these spreadsheets, and they're screenshots, so they're not Excel spreadsheets that I can move around. I will use my mouse to show you certain things that we're going to talk about. And this screen will be up for a while. And like I said, as with all of our webinars, as a Crest member, you're always entitled to go back and watch them. This will be posted on our website later today. And as a Crest member, you have full and free access to go look at any of these. So I recommend, if you want to take a closer look at this as we progress and as you come back to this in the next days and weeks, please feel free to log on and go right to the archived webinar section. They'll all be listed by presenter, and they'll be listed according to topic as well. You'll notice here I've got a 2019 lead board, Reliable Restoration. This is actually where we keep track of every single lead that comes into the company. It's color-coded by the ones that get closed are in green, and the ones that don't get closed are in red. Look over here. I just took a snapshot of a small part of the screen. So here we've got about 35 or 40, maybe 50 leads here. The number on the left-hand side is the actual sequential number for the year. We list the date. We have our prospect. At Reliable, we do last name first for all of our client filings. So we list it last name first. We have the geographic location. We have a column that says C/R. This is whether or not the loss is a commercial loss or a residential loss. So we just have a drop-down menu that the data input person is able to click on, and it either pops up a COM or a res for commercial or residential. The loss type, that's very important. We want to know exactly what type of loss is coming into us. Is it a water loss? You'll see down here we have a contents loss that comes in. We have sewage losses. We have mold losses. We'll have other topics as well. We might have a roofing loss. We might have a recon loss where all the water has already been extracted and the drying has occurred by another company, and then we get contacted by a client for the possibility of doing a little bit of reconstruction, because here at Reliable, they do that work. We may also get an asbestos lead because we also do asbestos here at Reliable. So you'll notice that there's quite a bit of information in there. Our lead source is a very, very important aspect of our information gathering. We want to know exactly who we're getting our leads from. So you'll notice in this list, there are different plumbing companies listed. And then even within the plumbing company, we have the name of the individual who's providing us with that lead. Up on top, you've got Plumbing Express. You've got another one down here. You've got two Fulton Plumbings. These are two individuals at the front desk who receive the calls. And then they are known to, at times, make their own decisions. These women, Tracy and Darlene, will call us directly from the plumbing company when they know that it's someone who's not in search of a plumber, but really in search of a water damage restoration company. We get leads from Google. We get leads from Yelp. We get leads from all these different sources. We list them out because we want that data. Like I was referring to before, we want to know the validity and the quality of our lead sources. The next one is the marketer. We want to know which one of our marketers is tied to that particular account. So we'll list our marketers' names in this column as well. If it's a lead from the internet, there is no direct marketer for the internet, so we just leave those blank. Our responder, I mentioned before how we use a first responder model. So we send out an individual to be the closer on that job. Our responders right now are gentlemen named Nathan and Shrey. You'll see their names frequently now down here towards the bottom. You'll also see a couple of times names like Francisco or Ashay. Those individuals will be our crew leaders. I said before that we don't send out our crew leaders, and that's correct except in the case of after hours or weekend duty. We have an on-call rotation that does not involve our first responders, only our crews. So the crew leader will be responsible every once in a while for going out and attempting to sign up a project. Ultimately, those do get handed off to the first responders because our first responders also provide project management services and do all the monitoring on the projects. But for the initial response, we keep track of who goes out and tries to get the contract signed. That way, we have a good understanding of how our first responders are working, but we also know when our crew leaders are the ones responding nights and weekends, what their success ratio is. There are a series of boxes in here. MIT would be a mitigation call. CONT would be, does the job involve a contents pack out or a contents request? ENV would be, is this project also an environmental request? Does it have asbestos or lead possibilities? And then recon is pretty clear. Those are projects that the client would require reconstruction as well. So if we look at this one line right here, line number 470, came in on 10/28. This client in Atlanta had a water loss that was referred by a plumber. David is the salesperson, the marketer. Nathan was the responder, and this project turned out that it needed mitigation and contents because the flooring needed to be removed and then replaced. So this was not a manipulation, this was a pack out. And it also required an environmental solution because the house was a little older, and when the samples were taken, it was discovered that there was asbestos in the drywall. So this mitigation had to be done with the contents and an environmental, and the customer also requested to have recon. Next column is job with a question mark. This column is very simplistic. It's either a Y for a yes and an N for a no. If the job is still sitting out there resolved, it should be blank. I don't like having jobs sitting out there for days at a time, not being either a yes or a no, because to me, that's a stall tactic. And just like Dick always teaches in his marketing classes, getting to an answer is much better than leaving it out there. Our marketers have a tendency to never want to get a no, so they'll accept it. I'll let you know in a week. We teach our marketers to not accept that from their marketing sources, and we teach our responders to not accept that either. We want either a strong yes or a strong no as soon as we can. It's one thing if the client says, I'm going to find out if I have coverage, and we'll work with them on that. But we don't like to have too many jobs hanging out there. So this gives us a true count of how many jobs out of how many leads. If the job is declined, we want a simple reason for the decline. And it's, this one will say no abnormal moisture. So this was probably a very small loss. Somebody didn't understand what they were looking at. They called us from Google, so it was no big deal. The final column is the lead type. I was saying before, we actually get the lead source, but the lead source itself, we want to know what category those fall in, because we have several different lead types. We'll have plumbers, we'll have the internet, we'll have brokers or agents, and we have what we call house leads, clients that have been clients of the company for a long time and don't belong to any one particular marketer. So we want to categorize them because we want to have some breakdown. So I hope everybody gets an understanding of how much data we're collecting. Now remember, we're collecting this data on every single call that comes into the company, whether or not it results in a job. We feel that's very, very important data to collect. We think it's a very important aspect of the company, and we feel that it has helped us understand and refine our processes. That data then gets analyzed. We talked about data analytics. Well, here's the result of data analytics. We run all of our data through processes, and we come up with what I call a scoreboard. Here's what a scoreboard would look like. Now, this is generic in nature, but you can see that a lot of the information here is very important. Total leads year to date is up here on the left. We break them down by residential and commercial leads. So right off the bat, I can look at a couple of things. These are through 11 months. You'll see here it says all leads and projects through 12/2/19. So we're talking about 11 months of data here. Commercial leads, 46. This tells me the company through 11 months is generating about 4 leads a month commercial. It tells me on the residential side, the company is generating about 45 leads or so on the residential side every month. Let's go to the right-hand side, total projects to date. We know that of the 534 total leads, 309 of them have resulted in projects. And on the left side, there's a little cheat side. You can actually see the projects here in small numbers. 279 of them are residential, 30 are commercial. So that tells us how many we've got. Of those 309 projects, 288 of them were primarily mitigation projects. They could have other aspects to them, but their primary purpose was mitigation. Our closing ratio is 58.08%. Not a great closing ratio, but like I said before, we count all leads that come into the company, not just the leads that are closed. So it's very important. I'd rather have honest numbers that don't look really good and know where we can be stronger than have really impressive looking numbers that don't tell the full picture. I was talking before about we get Y's or N's on that last slide, and that's a very important aspect of what we do. You'll see here, out of all the projects that came in this year, we only had 1 open lead as of 12/2. Very important to see. Then we break down the leads in the left-hand side. We break them down by the type of lead, who the marketer was that generated the lead, and the type of loss that was part of that lead. And you can see some of the numbers in here. It's very important to understand because we are very, very strong in the plumber and in the internet. We're very, very weak in the brokers. We do not market to brokers, generally speaking, and that's an area where we know we want to strengthen our focus going into 2020. So these numbers tell us an awful lot. They also tell us which leads close better than others, because as you go across, you'll see the project stats. So the next column between lead type, marketer, and loss type tell us how many of those projects got closed. And then on the back side, you'll see the percentages. So all the way from left to right, you see leads, projects, and percentages. So the ones that we do really well on are our plumber leads. We do extremely well on plumber leads, and we do fairly well on house leads. Our internet is a weak spot for us, and that's what's dragging our closing ratios down quite a bit. So we need to analyze that and understand what our weaknesses are in the internet. We do know that when you do a lot of Google, Google tends to have a lot of what we call tire kickers. We do a lot of Google and a lot of Yelp. Yelp has been pretty successful. Google has been pretty successful, but we also understand that this number is not an abnormality. We shouldn't be getting 60 or 70% closing ratios. Believe it or not, once we did our analysis, we realized that our closing ratios were actually a little low on the plumber side. The national average for plumber closing should be closer to 75% of leads. This means that one of two things is happening. Either we are just getting bad leads from bad plumbers and we need to refine that selection process, or maybe our marketing techniques and the terminologies we're using to the plumbers in persuading them to use us is creating an atmosphere where they feel they can just call us with anything as opposed to just the good ones. So we need to analyze that, and we have an understanding internally that I won't share with you guys, but we have an understanding internally of what needs to be done, and we're addressing that. But the numbers tell us that, not our gut, not our instincts, and not our feelings about what a great guy Joe the plumber is. We know what his numbers look like. Now, I don't have it in here, but within this plumber count of 279, we have a separate spreadsheet that breaks out every single one of these leads by the plumber. We have a sheet that's about this size that breaks out every single company, every single plumber, and we know how many leads they generate. We also know their closing ratios as well. So we can get extremely granular with the types of information that we choose to look at, and then the things that become action items for us. We don't make decisions based on gut when it comes to this kind of information because we've got too much data that tells us whether our gut is right or wrong. So we always like using our gut as a businessman and our instincts as a good businessman, but we also rely on the data very much to what we call confirmation analysis. We want to have an idea and then confirm it using the data. Okay, coming down, you'll see marketers, their amount of leads, their amount of closes, and their ratios. And then we have the types of losses. We have obviously predominantly water losses that come in, and then how many result in jobs, and then the closing ratios for those. You can see we're a little above average in sewage, and we're below average in fire and mold. Contents were right about online, and our recon leads, we tend not to take a lot of our recon leads because many times we'll get calls from clients where they're unhappy with their previous vendor. The company may be dried out their property and they just didn't like them. And when we get those kinds of calls, we're not very anxious to take those projects on because if they're upset with someone else, there's a really good chance they're already upset with the process. That's just a psychological thing for us. So I would sit there and say that if you wanted to look at this realistically, out of this percentage of 58.08% all the way at the top, I would say at least 5% of that could be attributed to jobs that we are choosing not to take because of our own particular choices and our own particular concerns with how we want our business to operate. So I think let's call it our unbiased closing ratio is probably closer to 63%. And if you're closing at 65 to 70% of all leads generated, that's not a terrible closing ratio. Obviously, we'd like to have our plumber closing ratios higher, and we'd like to work on some things regarding the internet, but we're going to keep analyzing this data. I just want you to understand how important it is to have access to this kind of information. The next sheet I'm going to show you is even more information I'm going to show you. This is information about projects themselves. Everything I just showed you, we just talked about the leads. These are snippets of 4 different analysis boards from our mitigation projects alone. So once again, I've got permission from Reliable to share this information with you guys, and I do that not for purposes of either bragging or demeaning Reliable's efforts. I'm doing it to show you guys exactly how the process works and how we can gather this information in a way that's very important for us. Okay, we talked before about the 288 projects so far this year. That you can see that up on the board here. And you can see that 260 of them were residential, 28 were commercial. So we talked again, 11 months, through 11 months, we're talking about 2.5 commercial jobs a month. That's not a terrible blend. We get a couple of calls, and it works really well for us. Our year-to-date volume that's come in is 1,415,000. That's the mitigation dollars that has come in. If you take a simple math and you take that number and divide it by the total number of projects, our average project size is 5340.81. Okay? When people talk about average project size, they always refer to the general national average, which is about $3,200, which includes people doing work on programs. If you're a non-program vendor, your average job should be about $3,500, $3,600. But I'm going to show you somewhere on here where we even break that out even more granularly, because I said this 288 reflects both residential and commercial. When we do our budgets for the next year, we budget out separate line items for residential revenue and commercial revenue. So I just want to show you that. But on the top here, this is the information. We do plumber referrals. This is a little spot that shows how much money year to date has been spent on plumber referrals. Sounds like a lot of money. $55,000 is an awful lot of money to generate for plumber referrals. But if you take $55,000 and figure out how much money was generated by the plumbers, it turns out to be a very small percentage of the overall revenue. So we're perfectly okay understanding that plumber referrals is basically a marketing expense. We're paying marketers to go out and generate business. So that's kind of what we're looking at, that this is just another marketer on our staff that's bringing in business and making calls for us. On this list down here, you'll see we've got a small list that looks very similar to the list we had before. We have our job number, we've got our date, we've got our client, our location, whether it's a commercial or residential loss, the type of loss, the lead source, who the marketer and the responder were. And then it changes because this is our actual project board. Now we put in the amount of the invoice and whether a referral fee was paid out or not. Okay, you'll see different numbers here. In Atlanta, it's a very, very competitive market. I don't want to disclose too much about referral fees, other than to say that it's a very competitive market and Reliable stays very competitive in trying to secure projects. Okay, you will notice that the project invoice sizes are in here and they're varied. We have an $875 job. We have a $125 job. We've got a $10,000 job, a $13,000 project. And we've got one that says free job, because one of the things that we offer as a marketing incentive to our plumbers is that if they have a little mishap, we'll go in and we'll help them take care of the issue at no cost to them. So we list it as a free job. It still counts as a project in our project count, because we're still sending crews out, so we're still incurring a cost. So I like to use that as an idea of how many calls we're getting, but it's just a zero revenue project, and we're fine with understanding that that's part of our master plan. Down here on the left box, this is a separate box that gives us the year-to-date counts for the revenue generated by each of our marketers. Okay, the number on the left represents how many projects that marketer brought in, then their name, then the total gross dollars in the mitigation department that those projects generated. And then the column on the far right is their average project size. Okay, Eric is no longer with the company. He left in January, so he doesn't have a large sample size. We just leave it in there because it helps to round out all the numbers for everybody. David has generated projects in an average of $3,100 to $3,200. Wes, who happens to be the owner of the company and has connections that go back years and years, has generated projects of $6,761. Now, a lot of the commercial projects that we've done happen to have been Wes's clients, so that number is intrinsically higher based on the fact that commercial is built in here. Let me show you on the right-hand side. We've got a breakdown between the residential revenue and the average residential project, and the commercial revenue and the average commercial project. And I'm here to just tell you that this is a number, these two boxes here are numbers that we rely extremely heavily on for our analytics and for our budgeting for next year. We are very, very big on making sure that we understand our project sizes. Our project size here at Reliable over the last 5 years has fluctuated between $3,800 and $4,250 over the last 5 years. We are right now operating this year at $4,024.15, which is right in the sweet spot for where we want to be. When we do our budgets every year, we budget $4,000 as an average residential job size. Now, Dick will tell you a lot of his marketing, especially a lot of the Crest and residential, a lot of the Crest and commercial marketing, the concept of prep, all revolves around the fact that the average job size is shrinking every year on the residential side. We have found that to be true. One of the things we were able to do this year due to getting data is we realized that the job sizes at the end of last year and the beginning of this year were starting to be tailing off, mainly because many of our clients were not seeking to put their losses through insurance and were requesting a cash pay price. Now, the way we operate here in Atlanta, if we give a cash pay price to a client, it's probably going to be a little lower than the final ultimate Xactimate price for a couple of reasons. Number one, we want to help out the client a little bit, but more than likely it's because of a business decision. If the client's paying cash, they're going to be getting that money to us right up front or as soon as we take the equipment out on that fourth or fifth day. So we don't have to wait weeks or even months to fight and haggle with insurance companies and mortgage companies to get our money out. So because there's no cost of money or cost of doing business above and beyond the actual cost of the labor and materials for us, we're willing to give the client a preferential rate on that as opposed to the full freight Xactimate rate. The reality, though, of that is the project size was going down. So one of the things we did is we recalibrated our price lists in Xactimate so that we had a better understanding of what our true costs were, and we can pass that along to the clients when we do our projects. So from the beginning of this year to the end of this year, our number has drifted upwards because we're now invoicing slightly higher for our work than we did in January. And it's only fair because we are providing superior service and we do have carrying costs that are above and beyond a lot of our competitors. That is exactly what Xactimate tells us to do, and it's exactly what we should be doing as business people. I just show these to you because it's really important to understand that I'm a numbers guy. I came from Wall Street, and to me, spreadsheets are everything. The only way to analyze a business is to look at the numbers. And you can say, yeah, the product's fantastic, the product's great. But in the case of some companies, if you're putting out a product that's fantastic and you're selling it for $80, but it costs you $100 to make, you won't have that great product around very long because you'll be out of business. In the same vein, we could be providing the greatest service out there, but if we don't know what we're looking at and how we can access that information and what we can do with it, we're basically putting ourselves in a position where we're setting ourselves up for failure. I hope at least you understand a little bit of what we've been able to get out of here in the last 40 minutes or so, because you need to gather the data. Like I'm saying here in this slide, if you want to gather and analyze data like this, give me a call. These spreadsheets I created for Reliable Restoration are available to all Crest members. All they have to do is ask. I don't make them downloadable because I want to make them personal for you guys. So you give me a call and we'll set something up where we can get some data from you, get some information, and we can have these set up so that by the first of the year, you can start collecting data, and it won't take long before you can have some really good information accessible to you. Next month, we're going to discuss how to manage a surge in your local market. I know with the storm seasons past us, people aren't worried about traveling too much, but we're getting into the cold weather. As I have this webinar today, the Northeast and the Midwest is being socked with terrible weather and bitter cold and snow and ice. So those seasons are coming where we're going to have problems because we're going to have more phone calls than we have crews. And we're going to need to know how to deal with that. This is a request from a Crest member, and we're going to be putting this together early in January. So we welcome you to keep your eyes open and check the schedules on the Crest website. Okay? On behalf of Dick Wagner, this is Bill Giannone. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us this morning, and I wish you nothing but continued success.